Brittany Murphy, the star of Clueless and 8 Mile, collapsed in the bathroom of her Hollywood Hills mansion on the morning of December 20th, 2009. At 32 years old, she was gone, leaving behind a series of unanswered questions that still haunt the landscape of modern celebrity tragedy. The news of her death, officially attributed to pneumonia and anemia, was a shocking headline that seemed utterly incomprehensible. How could a star so full of vibrant, effervescent life, a talent so versatile and beloved, be extinguished so suddenly, so young? The story that began to emerge in the wake of her death was not one of a simple, tragic medical event. It was a tangled, deeply strange narrative involving a controversial husband, a reclusive lifestyle, a stalled career, and persistent rumors of addiction and eating disorders that had dogged her for years. Her death was not an ending. It was the beginning of a mystery, a heartbreaking Hollywood noir that would only deepen with time, leaving a legacy of immense talent overshadowed by profound and unsettling questions. To understand the woman who died so mysteriously in that Hollywood mansion, one must travel back to the working-class suburbs of New Jersey, where a little girl with a huge voice and an even bigger dream was being raised by a devoted single mother who would become the central, defining, and ultimately tragic figure in her life. Brittany Ann Murphy was born on November 10, 1977, in Atlanta, Georgia, into a family unit that was fractured from the start. Her mother, Sharon Kathleen Murphy, was a woman of Irish and Eastern European descent with a fierce, protective love for her daughter. Her father, Angelo Joseph Bertolotti, was a charismatic but dangerous figure with documented ties to organized crime, a man who would be in and out of prison for various offenses throughout his life. The marriage between Sharon and Angelo was short-lived and tumultuous. They divorced when Brittany was just 2 years old, an event that would create a permanent void in her life. Angelo became a ghost, an absent father whose shadowy reputation would follow Brittany throughout her career. In the wake of the split, Sharon, now a single mother, made a life-altering decision. She moved with her young daughter across the country to Edison, New Jersey, a sprawling middle-class suburban town that was a world away from the instability of her past and the Hollywood glamour Brittany would one day inhabit. Edison in the 1980s was a landscape of modest single-family homes, shopping malls, and public schools, a seemingly normal place to raise a child. But the life of Sharon and Brittany Murphy was anything but normal. It was a life defined by an intense, almost symbiotic bond and a singular, all-consuming mission: to make Brittany a star. The relationship between Sharon and Brittany became the central, unwavering pillar of Brittany's existence. They were an inseparable two-person unit navigating the world together. Sharon poured her entire existence into her daughter, working a series of jobs to provide for them, but dedicating every spare moment and dollar to nurturing the obvious, precocious talent that Brittany displayed from an almost impossibly young age. Brittany was a born performer. She was effervescent, charismatic, and possessed a powerful, soulful singing voice that seemed to belong to someone twice her age. Her energy was boundless, her ambition clear and unwavering. This was not a case of a pushy stage mother forcing an unwilling chud into the spotlight. By all accounts, including Brittany's own, the drive came from within. In a later interview, she would recall a moment at the age of 5 when she looked at her mother and declared with the unwavering certainty of a child prodigy, "I am going to be an actress." For Sharon, this was not a childish fantasy to be indulged. It was a life plan to be executed. She became her daughter's #1 fan, her staunchest supporter, her fiercest protector, and her constant companion. This intense, insular relationship, however, would have profound and complex consequences. It fostered Brittany's talent and gave her an unshakable foundation of love and support. But it also created a world where her mother's approval was paramount, a codependence that would make it difficult for her to form lasting independent relationships in her adult life. Brittany's childhood was a whirlwind of training. While other children were playing, she was in dance classes, singing lessons, and acting workshops. She was a fixture in local theater productions, and by the age of 9, she was performing in regional musicals like Les Miserables and Really Rosie. By the time she was a preteen, she had already signed with a manager and was commuting into New York City for auditions. Her ambition was ferocious, her work ethic relentless. At the age of 13, with Brittany's career gaining momentum, Sharon made the ultimate gamble. Convinced of her daughter's potential, she packed up their lives in New Jersey and relocated to Burbank, California. This was not a move of wealth and connections. It was an act of faith. They were a single mother and her talented daughter with limited funds arriving in a city notorious for crushing the dreams of aspiring actors. But Brittany's talent was undeniable. Within a matter of weeks, she landed her first professional television role. In 1991, she was cast in the Fox sitcom Drexel's Class, starring the veteran character actor Dabney Coleman. The show, set in a public elementary school, was short-lived, lasting only 1 season. But for Brittany, it was a crucial first step, a foot in the door of the industry she was so desperate to conquer. It provided her with her Screen Actors Guild card and the professional legitimacy she needed to secure more auditions. Throughout the early 1990s, she worked steadily, becoming a familiar face to casting directors as a reliable and talented young actress. She amassed a string of guest-starring roles in popular television shows that are a veritable time capsule of the era: the family sitcom Blossom, the political comedy Murphy Brown, the teen drama Party of Five, and the sophisticated sitcom Frasier. She was a chameleon capable of sharp comedic timing in one role and surprising emotional depth in the next. She was honing her craft, learning the technical demands of acting for the camera and navigating the brutal, competitive world of a child actor in Hollywood, always with her mother Sharon by her side as her protector and guide. She was building a resume, but she was still largely an unknown face to the public, waiting for the one iconic role that would lift her from the ranks of working actresses and launch her into the stratosphere of pop culture consciousness. That role, a character that would forever define her in the public imagination, was just around the corner. It was the part of a clueless high school student who undergoes a transformative makeover in a film that would become one of the most beloved and iconic teen comedies of all time. Her life of quiet, professional striving was about to be consumed by the chaotic, overwhelming, and ultimately destructive glare of superstardom. By the mid-1990s, the landscape of teen cinema was in a state of flux. The earnest, heartfelt comedies of the John Hughes era had faded, leaving a void filled with a cynical, often grungy Gen X sensibility. It was into this landscape that writer-director Amy Heckerling, who had already defined a previous generation with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, unleashed her brilliant, candy-colored, and deceptively sharp satire, Clueless. The film, a clever modernization of Jane Austen's novel Emma, was set not in the English countryside, but in the sun-drenched, privileged world of a Beverly Hills high school. It was a film that would not only redefine the teen genre, but would become a cultural touchstone, a perfect time capsule of 90s fashion, language, and attitude. The casting process for Clueless was extensive. For the central role of the new girl, Ty Frazier, described in the script as a clumsy, clueless transfer student from the East Coast who becomes the makeover project of the popular Cher Horowitz. Heckerling was looking for a very specific kind of actress. She needed someone who could be believably awkward and out of place, but who also possessed an inner spark, a comedic timing, and a vulnerability that would make the audience root for her. Hundreds of young actresses auditioned, but it was the 17-year-old Brittany Murphy who captured the role. She brought a raw, unpolished, and deeply authentic energy to the audition that was perfect for Ty. She was funny, she was relatable, and most importantly, she had a genuine sweetness that shone through the character's initial awkwardness. When Clueless was released in the summer of 1995, it was a critical and commercial sensation. The film's witty dialogue, its vibrant aesthetic, and its perfect cast of future stars made it an instant classic. And at the heart of the film's emotional arc was Brittany Murphy's performance. Her transformation from the frumpy, frizzy-haired new girl with a thick New Jersey accent into a confident, popular member of the clique was the film's centerpiece. Her delivery of lines like, "You're a virgin who can't drive," became instantly iconic. But beyond the comedy, she brought a profound sense of pathos to the role. The audience felt her initial loneliness, her joy at being accepted, and her eventual heartbreak when she realizes she has lost herself in the process of trying to fit in. It was a star-making performance, the kind of breakthrough that every young actor dreams of. The success of Clueless catapulted Brittany Murphy from a working, anonymous actress into a bona fide it girl. She was suddenly a recognizable face, a fixture in teen magazines, and a symbol of 90s cool. The role of Ty Frazier, however, was a double-edged sword. It made her a star, but it also typecast her. For the next few years, she was primarily offered roles that were variations of the quirky best friend or the troubled outsider. While she worked steadily in a series of independent films and television movies, she struggled to break free from the shadow of her most famous character. It was during this period that the immense, often brutal pressures of Hollywood began to take their toll. The media, which had once celebrated her quirky, girl-next-door appeal, now began to focus with an almost obsessive intensity on her physical appearance. The transformation her character had undergone on screen, from a slightly heavier, ugly duckling to a thin, stylish swan, seemed to create a real-life expectation. The tabloids began to speculate endlessly about her weight. She was photographed from unflattering angles, her body scrutinized, and rumors of eating disorders began to circulate. In response to this pressure, her physical appearance began to change dramatically. She lost a significant amount of weight, dyed her naturally brown hair blonde, and adopted a more glamorous, Hollywood-approved look. This transformation was a source of endless public debate, a visual representation of the pressures placed on young women in an industry that demands a very specific and often unattainable standard of beauty. She was no longer just an actress, she was a body, a subject to be judged, critiqued, and consumed by a voracious public. Despite these intense personal pressures, she was determined to prove her range as an actress. She began to actively seek out darker, more challenging roles that would force the industry to see her as more than just the girl from Clueless. She delivered a startlingly gritty performance in the 1996 cult classic Freeway, holding her own opposite Reese Witherspoon. But her most significant artistic move during this period was into the world of voice acting. In 1997, she was cast as the voice of the sweet, naive, and often clueless Luann Platter on Mike Judge's long-running animated sitcom King of the Hill. The role was a perfect fit for her unique, raspy, and incredibly expressive voice. For over a decade, she would voice the character, a job that provided her with a steady income and a creative outlet away from the physical scrutiny of the camera. It showcased her immense talent as a vocal performer, a skill that would become a signature of her career. The critical turning point, the role that definitively shattered her teen comedy typecasting, came in 1999 with her powerful, devastating performance in the drama Girl, Interrupted. In the film, she played Daisy Randone, a fellow patient at a psychiatric hospital who is a victim of sexual abuse and suffers from a severe eating disorder. Her performance was a raw, exposed nerve, a harrowing portrait of a deeply traumatized young woman. The scene in which she confronts Winona Ryder's character, her chipper facade cracking to reveal the profound, self-loathing pain underneath, is a masterclass in controlled intensity. The role was a world away from the light, comedic fare she was known for, and it was a stunning display of her dramatic depth. Her work in Girl Interrupted was a critical triumph. It proved she was a serious, formidable actress, capable of a profound emotional range. This was followed by a string of high-profile roles that showcased her versatility. She starred opposite Michael Douglas in the thriller Don't Say a Word 2001, and delivered a memorable scene-stealing performance as the tough, street-smart Alex in Curtis Hanson's critically acclaimed film 8 Mile 2002, holding her own opposite the superstar rapper Eminem in his acting debut. Her performance in 8 Mile was particularly praised, capturing a perfect blend of vulnerability and gritty resilience. She was finally, it seemed, being recognized for the full spectrum of her talent. She had successfully navigated the treacherous journey from teen comedy sensation to respected dramatic actress. She was a leading lady, a sought-after talent, and she was poised on the edge of the next and most successful phase of her career. But the shadows of her past, the intense media scrutiny, the pressures on her physical and mental health, and the deep-seated insecurities forged in a life of striving were gathering, waiting for their moment to descend. The dawn of the new millennium marked the beginning of Brittany Murphy's ascent to the A-list. Having proven her dramatic capabilities in Girl Interrupted, she entered a period of intense work and high visibility, finally shedding the last vestiges of her Clueless typecasting. She was a chameleon, a rare actress who could effortlessly pivot from gritty independent dramas to mainstream high-concept studio films. But it was her role opposite the biggest and most controversial music star in the world that would permanently cement her status as a formidable leading lady. That project was the 2002 semi-autobiographical drama 8 Mile, starring the rapper Eminem. The film, directed by the acclaimed Curtis Hanson, was a cultural event of immense proportions. The story of a young, white rapper trying to find his voice in the predominantly black battle rap scene of Detroit was raw, authentic, and highly anticipated. For the crucial role of Alex, the tough, ambitious, and emotionally complicated love interest who both supports and betrays Eminem's character, Hanson needed an actress who could radiate a believable street-smart strength, while also conveying a deep underlying vulnerability. He found that in Brittany Murphy. Her performance was a revelation. She disappeared into the role, her portrayal of a young woman trapped in a dead-end life, but armed with a fierce survival instinct feeling utterly authentic. She was not just the girlfriend. She was a fully realized character, a mirror of the protagonist's own desperate ambition. Her chemistry with Eminem was electric, a raw, believable connection that grounded the film's emotional core. 8 Mile was a massive critical and commercial success, and Murphy's performance was singled out for praise. She had proven she could stand toe-to-toe with the biggest star in the world, and not just hold her own, but shine. She was now, unarguably, a serious A-list actress. With this critical acclaim as her foundation, Hollywood finally saw her as a bankable leading lady. She immediately pivoted, showcasing her commercial appeal in a string of successful mainstream comedies. In 2003, she starred opposite Ashton Kutcher in the romantic comedy Just Married. The film, a light, frothy story about a disastrous honeymoon, was a box office smash, grossing over $100 million worldwide. The on-screen romance famously spilled over into a real-life, high-profile relationship with Kutcher, a pairing that placed both of them directly in the crosshairs of the burgeoning and increasingly predatory tabloid culture of the early 2000s. For the first time, Brittany was not just being written about for her roles, but for her personal life. She was now a full-fledged celebrity, a daily fixture in the pages of Us Weekly and In Touch. She followed this with another iconic and beloved role in the 2003 film Uptown Girls. She played Molly Gunn, a flighty, privileged heiress who loses her fortune and is forced to become a nanny to a precocious, uptight young girl played by a young Dakota Fanning. The film was a perfect vehicle for her unique talents, allowing her to be both hilariously ditzy and deeply touching. Her performance captured the poignancy of a young woman forced to confront adulthood for the first time, and it remains one of her most cherished roles. She had reached the peak of her career. She was a critically respected dramatic actress and a commercially proven comedy star. She was in demand, she was famous, and she was, in the eyes of the world, living a dream. But behind the scenes, the immense pressures of this new level of fame were exacting a terrifying price. The intense media scrutiny that had begun in the late 90s now became a relentless, all-consuming obsession, and its primary focus was her dramatic physical transformation. During this peak period of her career from 2002 to 2005, she lost a significant amount of weight, and her facial features appeared to change. The transformation was stark, and the tabloid media seized upon it with a grotesque, almost gleeful ferocity. Anonymous sources were quoted in endless articles speculating about rampant drug use, severe eating disorders, and extensive plastic surgery. She was a walking headline, her body a battleground for public speculation. The reality, as Brittany herself repeatedly and vehemently insisted in interviews, was far more mundane. She attributed her weight loss to a healthier lifestyle and the physical demands of her roles. She denied all accusations of drug use and eating disorders with a pained, frustrated sincerity, but in the toxic, misogynistic media environment of the time, her denials were dismissed. The narrative had been set, and it was far more profitable than the truth. The constant, invasive speculation about her health took a profound psychological toll. The bright, effervescent, and confident young woman was now forced to be constantly on the defensive, her every public appearance an opportunity for the world to scrutinize her body. The joy of her success was being systematically poisoned by the cruelty of the public gaze. In the midst of this professional success and personal turmoil, she was engaged in a desperate search for a grounding, stable force in her life. Her high-profile romance with Ashton Kutcher ended. She was briefly engaged to talent manager Jeff Quatinetz, and then to production assistant Joe Macaluso. Each relationship was a source of intense media speculation, another chapter in the public soap opera of her life. The one constant remained her incredibly close, codependent relationship with her mother, Sharon, who was a permanent fixture by her side. But as she entered her late 20s, she yearned for a partnership, a family of her own. It was this yearning for stability that would lead her to the most controversial and enigmatic figure of her entire life. A little-known British screenwriter and photographer named Simon Monjack. Their meeting and subsequent marriage would mark the beginning of the final, tragic, and deeply mysterious chapter of her story. A period of increasing isolation and professional decline from which she would never emerge. In the mid-2000s, as Brittany Murphy navigated the treacherous cross-currents of A-list fame and relentless media scrutiny, her personal life remained a source of deep instability. Her string of high-profile but ultimately failed relationships left her yearning for a grounding force, a partner who could provide the unconditional love and protection she had always found in her mother. It was in this state of emotional vulnerability that she was introduced in 2006 to the man who would come to define the final, tragic, and deeply mysterious chapter of her life. A little-known British screenwriter and photographer named Simon Monjack. To the outside world and to many within Brittany's own inner circle, Simon Monjack was an immediate red flag. He was a figure shrouded in controversy and suspicion. He was nearly 9 years her senior, with a history of legal troubles, including accusations of credit card fraud and running up massive debts. He had a reputation in the industry as a con man, a charismatic but untrustworthy figure who often exaggerated his professional accomplishments. His past was a murky landscape of failed film projects, lawsuits, and a brief, questionable marriage that ended in annulment. He was, in the eyes of many, the last person a vulnerable, sought-after movie star should have been involved with. Despite the warnings from concerned friends, Brittany fell for him hard and fast. In Monjack, a larger-than-life, articulate, and fiercely protective man, she seemed to find what she had been searching for. He was not a young, flighty actor like her previous boyfriends. He was an older, seemingly sophisticated man who showered her with attention and promised to shield her from the harsh glare of the industry. For a woman who felt constantly under attack by the media, his protective, almost domineering presence may have felt like a sanctuary. Their romance was a whirlwind. In a move that stunned Hollywood, they were married in a quiet, private Jewish ceremony at their home in May 2007, just months after her engagement to another man had ended. The marriage immediately and dramatically altered the landscape of Brittany's life. The couple, along with Brittany's ever-present mother, Sharon, formed an incredibly insular, almost impenetrable trio. Monjack quickly took on a central, all-consuming role in Brittany's life, not just as her husband, but as her primary professional gatekeeper. He became her manager, her agent, and in many ways, her only conduit to the outside world. Friends who had been a constant presence in her life for years suddenly found their calls going unanswered, their access to her completely cut off. The narrative that began to circulate was a deeply concerning one, that Simon Monjack was systematically isolating his famous wife from anyone who might question his influence. The most immediate and visible consequence of this new dynamic was a catastrophic decline in her career. The actress, who had just starred in a string of critically acclaimed dramas and blockbuster romantic comedies, suddenly found her career trajectory veering into the world of low-budget, often direct-to-video independent films. The A-list scripts stopped coming. She was now starring in forgettable thrillers and horror films, many of them filmed overseas, projects that were a world away from the prestige of 8 Mile or the cultural impact of Clueless. The reasons for this professional freefall are complex and still debated. Many in the industry pointed the finger directly at Monjack. His on-set behavior was reportedly disruptive. He was known to clash with directors and producers, and his constant presence and controlling nature made many in Hollywood reluctant to work with Brittany. A persistent narrative emerged that she had not just fallen out of favor, but had been effectively blacklisted, a talented actress rendered unemployable by the chaotic influence of her husband. For her part, Brittany, in her final interviews, fiercely defended both her husband and her career choices. She framed her move away from the studio system as a deliberate artistic decision, a chance to explore more complex, character-driven roles in independent film. But to the outside world, the contrast was stark and undeniable. The vibrant, in-demand star had been replaced by an actress on the fringes, her brilliant light seemingly dimming. The home she shared with Monjack and her mother on Rising Glen Road became a fortress. They reportedly believed they were under constant surveillance, that their phones were tapped, that helicopters were hovering over their house. This shared, escalating paranoia further deepened their isolation. Brittany's physical health also became a source of increasing concern. She appeared frail and alarmingly thin in her final public appearances, reigniting the very rumors about her health that had plagued her for years. The final ominous warning sign came in November 2009, just 1 month before her death. Brittany, Simon, and Sharon were all in Puerto Rico, where Brittany was filming a low-budget thriller called The Caller. The production was troubled from the start. After just 1 day of shooting, Brittany was fired from the film. The official reason given by the producers was that she was disruptive and difficult to work with, an echo of the rumors that had been circulating for years. The trio immediately booked a flight back to Los Angeles, but the drama followed them. During the flight, Simon Monjack reportedly became incoherent and unwell, and the captain was forced to make an emergency landing. Paramedics came on board, and the entire family was escorted off the plane, creating another bizarre, disturbing headline. They eventually returned to Los Angeles, but the incident was a clear public signal that the private world of Brittany Murphy and Simon Monjack was in a state of profound crisis. She had returned home, ill, having just lost a job and trapped in a deeply strange and isolated world, on the brink of the final tragic event of her life. The final weeks of Brittany Murphy's life, following the disastrous trip to Puerto Rico, were a descent into a quiet, private hell. The once vibrant actress was now a virtual recluse, confined to the sprawling mansion on Rising Glen Road with her husband Simon and her mother Sharon. The atmosphere in the house, as later described in reports, was one of escalating paranoia, isolation, and pervasive illness. All three members of the insular household were reportedly suffering from severe, flu-like symptoms. Yet they seemed deeply resistant to seeking outside medical help, instead choosing to self-medicate with a vast and chaotic cocktail of prescription and over-the-counter drugs. In her final days, Brittany was gravely ill. According to the coroner's report and her mother's testimony, she was experiencing severe abdominal pain, shortness of breath, and a debilitating weakness. She was suffering from laryngitis and was taking a plethora of medications, including antibiotics, cough syrup, and pain relievers, to treat what she believed was a severe case of the flu. On the night of December 19, 2009, she was in extreme distress, gasping for air. Still, no ambulance was called. The final tragic scene unfolded on the morning of December 20th. At around 8 a.m., after a period of being in and out of the bathroom, Brittany collapsed on the floor. It was her mother, Sharon, who found her. The frantic 911 call captured the raw, horrifying chaos of the moment. Paramedics arrived to find a scene of medical crisis, with a vast array of prescription pill bottles, reportedly over 90 of them, on the bedside tables. Their attempts to revive her were futile. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, after further resuscitation efforts failed, Brittany Murphy was pronounced dead at 10:04 a.m. She was 32 years old. The initial shock and grief soon gave way to a frenzy of speculation. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office conducted a thorough investigation to quell the rampant rumors of illegal drug abuse or an eating disorder. The final autopsy report, released in February 2010, provided a conclusion that was both medically sound and deeply unsatisfying. The primary cause of death was ruled to be community-acquired pneumonia. Two significant contributing factors were listed: a state of severe iron deficiency anemia, which had dramatically weakened her immune system, and, most controversially, multiple drug intoxication. The coroner was careful to note that all the drugs found in her system were legal prescription and over-the-counter medications taken to treat her illness, but their combined effect had been lethal. The death was officially ruled an accident. For a moment it seemed the case was closed, a tragic but understandable story of a young woman whose health had failed her. But the story was about to take a bizarre and horrifying turn that would transform it from a tragedy into an enduring Hollywood mystery. Just 5 months later, on the night of May 23, 2010, Sharon Murphy made another frantic 911 call from the same house. This time, she had found her son-in-law, Simon Monjack, unconscious in the master bedroom. Paramedics arrived, but once again it was too late. Simon Monjack, age 40, was pronounced dead at the scene. When the coroner's report for his death was released, a chill went through the public. The causes were shockingly, almost impossibly similar to his wife's: acute pneumonia and severe anemia. Two people, one house, both gone from the same rare medical causes, separated by only 152 days. The coincidence was so improbable it defied easy explanation, transforming a tragedy into the stuff of dark legend. The questions which had been simmering now exploded. What had happened in that house? A number of theories, none of them ever proven, began to circulate. Sharon Murphy, for a time, championed the theory that toxic mold in the house had been responsible for the pneumonia that killed both her daughter and son-in-law, though investigators found no conclusive evidence. Brittany's estranged father, Angelo Bertolotti, commissioned his own private lab tests on a strand of her hair, which he claimed found high levels of heavy metals, suggesting she had been deliberately poisoned, a claim the LA coroner publicly refuted as baseless. The most psychologically compelling and perhaps most tragic theory is that the insular, paranoid trio of Brittany, Simon, and Sharon had created a toxic echo chamber, a shared delusion that the outside world was a threat. In their self-imposed isolation, they may have failed to seek proper, timely medical care for what were likely treatable illnesses, instead relying on a dangerous, self-prescribed cocktail of medications that ultimately overwhelmed their weakened bodies. Was it a tragic case of neglect, a folie à trois where their shared paranoia proved fatal? The world will likely never know for sure. The legacy of Brittany Murphy is a heartbreaking diptych. On one side, there is the artist, a genuinely brilliant, effervescent, and versatile actress whose talent was undeniable. From the lovable Ty in Clueless to the soulful Luann in King of the Hill to the gritty Alex in 8 Mile, she had a unique, radiant quality that made her impossible not to love. Her filmography is a testament to a talent that was still growing, a promise of a long and fascinating career that was tragically unfulfilled. But the other side of her legacy is that of a cautionary tale, a permanent and unsettling Hollywood mystery. Her story is a dark exploration of the pressures of fame, the cruelty of media scrutiny, and the dangers of isolation. The unanswered questions surrounding her and her husband's bizarre parallel deaths have come to overshadow the vibrant life she lived and the brilliant work she created. Brittany Murphy was a star who blazed brightly and then vanished, leaving behind a sky that is both dazzling and haunting, and a question that no one can ever truly answer.